On a winter-white afternoon outside Denver, snow drifted across the rest stop like falling ash, turning every parked car into a silent monument. Travelers sipped warm drinks, unaware the calm was about to fracture. 19 German shepherds rested beside their handlers, until one tiny sound trembled through the icy air. Every head lifted, every ear twitched. These weren't ordinary dogs. Locals whispered a legend. 19 shepherds whose instincts pierced blizzards and heard what humans never could. Officer Daniel Ruiz recognized the look, the sudden stillness, the shared tension passing through the pack. Then Rex growled, low, ancient. 19 eyes locked onto an old snow-covered pickup, a truck everyone had ignored. Inside, something small was moving, a tremble, a rhythm, a silent plea only the dogs could hear. And in that frozen hush, a buried winter secret began to rise. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Winter in the outskirts of Denver was never gentle. That afternoon, the wind cut across Interstate 70 like a sharpened blade, carrying flurries of snow that whipped against every passing car. The sky hung low and heavy, a pale sheet of steel reflecting no warmth, and the small rest stop sitting beside the highway looked almost abandoned, buried beneath a soft, deceptively peaceful layer of white. Street lamps flickered from cold, their yellow light trapped in the swirling snow. It was the kind of winter day where breath turned to ice, and even engines seemed to shiver. Emily Thompson stepped out of her car and shut the door with a muted thud. She was a striking woman in her early 30s, with long brown hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, pale skin flushed pink from the cold, and sharp, expressive eyes that carried both strength and warmth. Her fitted red dress hugged her slender frame, elegant yet entirely impractical for the harsh weather, marking her as someone who had rushed out from a long road trip without expecting the world outside to be this cold. Snowflakes clung to the fabric, dotting her sleeves like frozen stars. Beside her, little Lily trudged through the snow in her pastel pink winter jacket, blue jeans, and brown boots. 8 years old, small and gently built, she had a round face framed by blonde hair tucked under a knitted hood, and wide eyes that reflected everything she felt: curiosity, delight, and a child's earnest wonder. They walked hand in hand toward the rest stop's convenience store, their boots crunching in the fresh snow. Lily exhaled, giggling at the warm cloud of vapor puffing from her lips. Emily smiled softly at her daughter, brushing loose snow from her hood. Across the parking lot, something far livelier was happening. 19 German shepherds, each one a disciplined, powerful K9, rested under the watch of their handlers after an intensive winter training drill. Their coats ranged from rich sable to classic black and tan, thick fur dusted with snow. Some sat tall and focused. Others pawed playfully at the snow. A few lay down with tongues hanging out, breaths creating miniature storms of steam. Older travelers nearby, wrapped tightly in scarves, chuckled at the sight of such majestic animals behaving like excited children on a snow day. Lily's eyes widened, her small hand tightening around her mother's. "Mom, look," she whispered, the sheer admiration in her voice almost glowing. Emily laughed softly. "I see them, sweetheart. They're beautiful, aren't they?" One dog stood out from the rest. Rex, a large, aging German shepherd with deep amber eyes, a scattering of gray around his muzzle, and a long scar tracing from his brow to his cheek. He had the calmness of a warrior who had seen more than he let on. Despite his size, he sat with a quiet alertness, ears rotating at every shift of the wind. Inside the store, Emily brushed snow from her dress and paid for 2 hot chocolate drinks, warming her hands around the cup. She didn't notice the man standing near the drink machine until he stepped forward. His name would later be identified as Marcus Hale, a tall, wiry man in his late 30s with a worn gray parka zipped up to his chin, a beanie pulled low over unkempt dark hair, and a face too composed for the freezing weather. His skin was sallow, jaw stubbled with uneven dark growth, and his eyes, ice blue and unfocused, held a strange, distant intensity that made most people instinctively step back. Marcus smiled politely at Emily, but the expression looked strange on him, as if he were imitating something he'd seen others do. His voice, soft and almost apologetic, carried no real warmth. "Cold day, huh?" he said, nodding toward the window where snow blanketed the world. Emily gave a quick, polite smile back, not wanting to engage further. She gently tugged Lily closer. "Very cold. We're just stopping briefly," she replied. Marcus didn't press the conversation. Instead, he drifted toward the door, pulling his hood up. But Lily, walking beside Emily, slowed when Marcus crouched just slightly and said, "Hey there, sweetheart. You know which road leads back to the main interstate? I think I'm lost." His tone was friendly, but something in his eyes, too sharp, too calculating, didn't feel right. Emily stepped between them immediately. "Sir, you can check the map by the doorway," she said firmly. Marcus nodded again, still smiling, and walked outside. But the moment Emily stepped behind Lily to adjust her coat, Marcus acted. A gloved hand, fast and precise, clamped over Emily's mouth. Another wrapped around Lily's wrist. The world flipped into chaos. Snow spun around them. Emily's cup dropped, splattering chocolate across the white ground. Marcus dragged them swiftly, silently, toward an old white pickup truck parked near the farthest edge of the lot. Rusty, forgotten-looking, half buried in snow as though it belonged there. Within seconds, Emily and Lily were shoved into the truck bed. Marcus's face loomed over them only for an instant, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "Don't scream." Then the metal door slammed down, and the lock clicked shut, a sharp sound swallowed by the wind. Inside the freezing compartment, hands tied, breath fogging the air, Emily and Lily huddled tightly together. Terror pulsed beneath Emily's skin, but she forced her voice to remain steady for Lily. "We're going to get out," she whispered. "I promise." But promises couldn't break steel. Instead, she lifted her bound wrists and tapped them against the metal wall. Soft, rhythmic, desperate. Lily copied her, tapping lightly with the heel of her boot. At first, the sound vanished into the roaring wind. Then, across the snowy parking lot, Rex lifted his head. His ears snapped forward. His eyes sharpened into focus. One dog heard, then another. Then all 19 sound. The entire pack turned toward the same point in the swirling snow, the white pickup truck. Just as Marcus Hale stepped back into view, heading straight toward it, the rumble of the distant engine grew louder, vibrating through the frozen air, as if the snow itself could sense the coming threat. Officer Daniel Ruiz tightened his grip on his utility belt. Daniel was a tall man in his mid-30s, with a squared jaw dusted with dark stubble, deep-set brown eyes sharpened from years in law enforcement, and a stern yet steady face carved by long nights on patrol. He had the kind of calm presence born from hardship, raised by a single mother who worked night shifts, He had learned early that fear was something you felt, but duty was something you did despite it. Today, that quiet resilience radiated from him as the glow of approaching headlights cut through the swirling white. Rex remained perched on the tailgate of the pickup truck, his massive frame rigid, amber eyes locked on the blur of light approaching from the highway. He let out another low, thunderous growl, deeper, more primal than before. The other 18 German shepherds reacted instantly. Vixen, the youngest at 2 years old, with a bright sable coat and eager spirit, barked once and stepped forward. Baron, the largest after Rex, a muscular black and tan male with a broad chest and a jagged scar across his flank, shifted his weight, fur bristling, and Scout, a lean, sharp-faced female with winter-pale eyes, stood motionless, analyzing every sound with unnerving precision. Each of them mirroring the same unmistakable instinct. Danger was coming straight at them. "Handlers, hold your dogs!" shouted Sergeant Tom Keller, the K-9 unit's supervisor. Keller was in his late 40s, heavy-set with a weathered face, sandy beard peppered with gray, and a gruff voice shaped by 20 years of barking orders in every kind of weather. Yet despite his intimidating look, he was known for being fiercely protective of both his officers and their dogs. Still, even Keller knew that when the entire pack disobeyed at the same time, it wasn't rebellion. It was warning. The black SUV swerved across the lot, tires skidding on the icy asphalt, spraying slush into the air like shards of white glass. The vehicle lurched to a stop not 20 yards from the pickup truck, its engine revving aggressively. Daniel instinctively stepped in front of Emily and Lily, who shivered behind him, still half-curled in the truck bed. Emily's long brown hair was tangled with frost, her red dress clinging to her trembling frame, but her eyes, wide, terrified, never left her daughter's face. Lily clutched her mother's arm, her pink jacket dusted with snow and her boots wet from the cold metal floor of the truck. The SUV door flew open. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. He wore a thick black winter coat, but even beneath it, the outline of solid muscle was visible. His name, unknown to the officers yet, was Victor Crow, a man whose past had been shaped by violence long before he ever encountered Emily and Lily. Victor had a square, harsh face framed by a buzzed haircut, and a heavy brow shadowing eyes of a chilling gray-blue. A deep scar traced from his jaw to his throat, hinting at an old injury that hadn't healed right. Everything about him radiated confidence, the cold, calculating kind that didn't flinch under pressure. His stare swept across the officers, then lingered on the 19 dogs forming a barrier around the truck. Victor raised both hands slightly, not in surrender, but in irritation. "Easy," he said, voice low and gritty, like gravel scraping metal. "You need to step aside. You've got something that belongs to me." Rex's growl erupted into a bark so powerful it echoed across the snowy lot. The entire pack tightened formation. Daniel felt the dogs shifting around him like a living storm. "Sir, stop where you are," Daniel commanded, hand inching toward his holster. Victor's jaw twitched. "The girl," he said, staring directly at Lily. "Hand her over." Emily's breath hitched. Lily pressed into her mother's side, her small fingers trembling. Sergeant Keller approached, boots crunching through the snow. "Nobody is going anywhere with you," he said firmly. "You need to step back." But Victor didn't. Instead, he smirked, a cold, humorless curve of the lips. "You think you understand what you're dealing with?" he asked. "You have no idea." Then he moved. It happened so fast, Daniel barely registered it. Victor lunged toward the truck, boots pounding the snow, fingers outstretched with intent. Rex launched himself off the tailgate like a missile. His massive body slammed into Victor's chest with a force that cracked through the air. The man stumbled back, arms flailing. Before he could recover, Baron and Scout flanked him, teeth bared, bodies angled to cut off every escape. Vixen circled behind, her bark piercing the frozen wind. "Stand down," Daniel shouted. Though he knew the dogs weren't attacking, they were protecting. Victor managed a clumsy sidestep and regained his balance. His eyes sparked with fury. "You're making a mistake," he growled. Rex didn't wait for him to finish. He planted himself between Victor and the truck, hackles raised, breath steaming like smoke. The other dogs mirrored him, forming a wall of fur and muscle that no human could hope to penetrate. Daniel drew his weapon halfway. "Sir, get on the ground, now!" Victor didn't obey. His gaze flicked past the officers toward the highway. The storm was thickening, the wind howling harder. Snow blew sideways, obscuring the distant road, and in that moment, Daniel noticed something else. A second set of headlights approaching. Another vehicle, maybe connected, maybe worse. Victor's lips curled again. "You're too late," he said softly. Rex snarled. The second vehicle sped closer. Daniel's pulse spiked. Emily tightened her grip on Lily, and the 19 German shepherds all simultaneously lifted their heads toward the oncoming lights. The sound of the black SUV skidding across the icy lot echoed like a violent crack through the winter air, shattering whatever fragile calm still lingered. Snow exploded upward in white plumes as the vehicle fishtailed into a stop. Officer Daniel Ruiz steadied himself, instincts sharpening. Behind him, Emily clutched Lily, her red dress trembling like a bright wound against the pale storm. Lily hid her face in her mother's side, but her small voice squeaked out, "Mom, it's him." Victor Crow stepped from the SUV with slow, deliberate confidence, as if the cold could not touch him. His thick black coat clung to his muscular frame, and the jagged scar running down his neck caught the dim winter light. His gray-blue eyes were colder than the weather itself. Eyes that had watched, calculated, waited. Victor wasn't a man shaped by accident. He was the product of a lifetime spent on the edges of violence. Raised in a household ruled by a cruel, absent father, he had learned early that control was the only power that mattered. That belief clung to him like a second skin. He gave Emily a smile, thin, crooked, wrong. "There's been a mistake," he said, as though reciting lines from a familiar script. "The girl is mine." Daniel stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. Beside him stood another officer, Officer Jared Langley, a broad-shouldered man in his late 20s with short, sandy hair, a square face, and a thick neck that made him look like a former college wrestler. Jared was earnest, loyal, dependable, but he often reacted before thinking, a trait Daniel privately worried about. Even now, Jared's jaw clenched hard, his breath fogging in sharp bursts. "She's not your daughter," Daniel replied, voice low. "Step back." But Victor didn't step back. Rex did. The old German shepherd positioned himself between Victor and the pickup truck, growling, hackles raised. His amber eyes glinted like embers in the snow-laden air. The other 18 German shepherds fanned out with choreographed precision. Baron's bulky silhouette anchored one flank. Scout's lean, sharp frame patrolled the other. Vixen, tail stiff, crept sideways with youthful readiness. their breath fogged in unison. 19 columns of steam, 19 warnings. Victor chuckled. You really think you've stopped anything? His eyes flicked to Lily. She's not the only one. The words hit like a blow. Emily's breath stuttered. Lily's fingers turned white around her mother's hand. The implication sank into the cold like a knife. Other children. Other victims. The world shrank to the sound of falling snow and Victor's icy voice. Then Victor moved. His arm flashed upward, revealing a glint of metal, a hooked utility blade, dull but deadly. Daniel jolted forward shouting, but his voice was buried by Rex's roar. The dog launched, tackling Victor's wrist with a force that drove the man backward. Snow shot into the air in a violent burst. Baron surged forward, blocking Victor's legs. Scout snapped at the side, cutting off escape. 2 more K9s smashed into Victor's torso, pinning him against the SUV. Victor grunted, fighting to regain footing. But 19 Guardians were faster, stronger, trained. The lot became a chaos of snarls, boots, snow, and instinct. "Get him on the ground!" Jared yelled, rushing in. He grabbed Victor's shoulders, wrestling with raw strength, while Daniel went for the man's arm. The blade clattered into the snow, swallowed instantly by White. Rex clamped onto Victor's coat sleeve, not tearing flesh, just pinning him with surgical precision. Victor's lips curled even as he was dragged down. "Too late," he hissed. "They're already gone." Daniel slammed him chest down into the snow. Jared hauled Victor's arms behind him, breath heaving. Keller rushed over, cuffs ready. Within seconds, Victor Crow lay manacled, cheek pressed into a spreading stain of red where his lip had split against the ice. Still, he laughed, a low, broken sound. "You'll never find them in time." His words seeped into the cold like poison. "Get him in the cruiser," Keller snapped. Victor was shoved into the back seat of a patrol SUV, the door slamming shut on his twisted grin. Daniel exhaled shakily and turned to Rex. The old shepherd's fur stood bristled, breath ragged, but he kept his gaze fixed on the tree line beyond the lot. Snow drifted there in thick sheets, blurring the edges of the forest. "We track from here," Daniel muttered. Jared nodded, wiping blood from his glove. "Let's move." A smaller K9 team assembled. Rex, Scout, Vixen, and 2 others. Duke, a 4-year-old with a heavy chest and dark saddle coat, stoic and quietly obedient, and Milo, a younger dog with keen ears and restless intensity. The 5 dogs moved like shadows across the snow, following Daniel and Jared toward the forest edge. As they entered the tree line, wind funneled between tall pines, screaming through the branches. Snow thickened, depth rising past their ankles. The world inside the woods was dimmer, colder, a maze of trunks and white silence. Rex stopped suddenly. Before him lay a patch of disturbed snow, flattened, churned, marked with the chaos of multiple bodies. Plastic zip ties half buried. A torn corner of a child's backpack. Small footprints mixed with drag marks leading deeper into the woods. Daniel's stomach knotted. "More kids," he whispered. He motioned the dogs forward. They lowered their noses, inhaling sharply. Scout growled. Milo barked once, sharp, urgent. Rex lifted his head and let out a long, resonant howl that shivered through the forest. Daniel froze as his radio crackled. "Unit 3, be advised. Snow Patrol just reported a suspicious white van heading uphill on Route 16. Signal lost. Could be your guy." Daniel looked up toward the mountain road hidden behind the trees. There, faint and fading under falling snow, were tire tracks angling upward. Damn it! He breathed. The wind howled louder. Rex barked, and the hunt began again. Night descended over the mountains like a heavy velvet curtain, darkening the already brutal winter terrain outside Denver. The blizzard thickened into sheets of white turbulence, swallowing the sky and drowning the forest in cold silence. Patrol vehicles lined the entrance of the rest stop, their emergency lights flashing against the swirling snow, casting blue and red glows across the frost-bitten asphalt. Officers paced with rigid shoulders, bracing against the cold, while guarding the entrance like sentinels. Inside the temporary waiting room, Emily Thompson sat curled on a plastic chair, wrapped in a coarse gray blanket someone had brought her. Snow still clung to her fitted red dress, creases and damp spots marking where she had fallen, been dragged, fought. Her long brown hair, usually soft and warm, was frozen at the tips, giving her the look of a woman pulled from the edge of a storm. Her eyes, normally determined, held a shaken softness, guilt lingering behind them. She held Lily close, her arm wrapped tightly around her daughter like a protective shell. Lily, in her pink jacket, blue jeans, and brown boots, leaned her small head against Emily's chest. Her blonde hair was frizzy from the static of the blanket, and though her face was pale, she still managed a tiny smile when one of the younger K9s, Milo, with sharp ears and a restless tail, pressed his nose against the fogged window. The imprint he left, a circular smudge on the glass, pulled a giggle from her lips despite everything. A group of officers lingered inside the lobby, murmuring quietly. One of them was Officer Denise Carter, a woman in her early 40s with dark skin, tightly curled hair pulled into a bun, and a posture that suggested a lifetime of resilience. Denise had a reputation for calm leadership, known for diffusing tense standoffs simply by stepping forward. Tonight, her brown eyes carefully monitored Emily and Lily, as though she was personally responsible for their lives. But safety was slipping fast. Out on the mountain pass, Daniel Ruiz drove slowly, his SUV crawling through the storm like a wounded animal. His headlights carved narrow tunnels of visibility through the chaos. Rex sat in the back seat, body tense, nose pressed close to the window. The old German shepherd's amber eyes were narrowed, scanning the darkness for something only he could sense. Alongside him sat Duke, the stoic 4-year-old with a thick coat and broad shoulders, and Scout, whose pale eyes flicked between shadows with surgical precision. Their breath fogged the interior, mixing with the metallic taste of incoming danger. Ahead, another police SUV led the way, driven by Officer Stephen Halbrook, a wiry man in his late 50s with silver hair and deep worry lines etched into his forehead. His narrow face and thin-framed glasses gave him an almost academic look. But he was fearless behind the wheel, a veteran of dozens of winter rescues. The cold had chiseled him into someone who never panicked. But even he drove tonight with his jaw clenched, knowing the mountain roads killed people every winter. Suddenly, Rex stiffened. His bark exploded inside the cabin, sharp, commanding, urgent. Daniel reacted instantly, easing the SUV to the roadside. Snow crunched as they stopped, and the wind clawed at the vehicle like a feral creature. Daniel switched on the high beams. That's when he saw it, a broken stretch of tire tracks, abruptly vanishing into a nearly invisible trail veering off the road and into a drift of untouched white. Stephen's voice crackled over the radio. "That's our van. They turned off-road." Daniel stepped out into the storm, wind blasting his coat open like invisible hands. Rex leapt into the snow beside him, paws plunging deep. Scout and Duke followed, instantly tracking the faint chemical scent left behind, engine fumes, rubber, cold metal. Led by Rex, the K-9 team charged forward into the narrow path. Snow whipped sideways in violent gusts, visibility dropping to just a few yards. Trees shifted like ghostly silhouettes around them. Daniel's boots sank ankle-deep as he followed the dogs into the forest's black mouth. Only a few minutes in, Duke halted. Before them lay a clearing, small, eerie, battered. Tire ruts dug deep into the frozen ground. Child-sized footprints scattered in panic. Drag marks, a plastic zip tie, the torn strap of a backpack, and in the center, a patch of snow compressed flat, as if something heavy, like a crate or another child, had been placed there long enough to leave a memory behind. But the van, gone. Daniel's heart dropped. Where the hell? The radio hissed with static, then cracked. Possibility the van doubled back, storms wiping tracks, might have slipped past the blockade. Daniel froze. If it turned back, the rest stop. Emily and Lily. He didn't finish. Rex growled into the darkness, sharp and vibrating, sensing something Daniel couldn't. Then, the radio died. Back at the rest stop, the storm intensified. Snow slammed against the windows like handfuls of shattered glass. Inside the waiting room, the lights flickered, humming with strain. Milo and the group of remaining dogs rose from their resting spots. Milo's ears perked. Baron, near the door, stood with rigid posture. The atmosphere thickened as if the building itself were holding its breath. Emily gathered Lily closer. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. Outside, far beyond the glass, headlights appeared. A vehicle moved slowly past the edge of the lot, circling, observing. Emily's heartbeat stuttered. Denise Carter stepped toward the window, hand on her holster. Behind her, Baron released a deep, warning rumble. One of the other dogs, a smaller female named Cora, bristled, a tan-coated K-9 with sharp reflexes and a protective streak famous in the unit. Then the lights inside the rest stop flickered once, twice, and died. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the cold white beam of the unknown vehicle's headlights pierced the storm, and from the shadows came a sound that rose like thunder. 19 German shepherds growling in unison, ready for war. Darkness settled over the powerless rest stop like a heavy shroud, but the silence didn't last long. 19 German shepherds filled the void with a low, rolling chorus of growls, an almost primal song echoing through the snow-choked night. For the handful of elderly travelers trapped inside, their fear somehow softened. If the dogs were still here, standing guard, they knew they had not been abandoned. A faint flicker sputtered overhead, and the emergency lights finally blinked on. The illumination was dim, yellowed, but enough to reveal the silhouette of a white van parked so close to the glass wall that its headlights spilled across the lobby floor like twin knives of light. Its license plate had been deliberately turned inward, out of sight. And stepping out of the driver's side came a man no one had seen before. He was in his early 30s, tall, with a narrow jaw and a carefully trimmed beard. His hair was cropped short beneath a black beanie, and his heavy insulated jacket looked brand new, too clean for a night like this. His eyes were the unsettling part, calm, methodical, scanning the interior of the rest stop with the casual detachment of someone inspecting merchandise. His movements were controlled, every step measured, as if he studied fear for a living. He didn't know the shadows were moving. From the dark edges of the lot, 19 German shepherds materialized like spirits rising from snow. Their bodies blended into the storm, but their eyes glinted gold, amber, and ice blue beneath the emergency lights. They didn't bark. They didn't rush. They simply formed a circle, tight, disciplined, deadly quiet. Rex was the first to step into full view. The old shepherd's fur was crusted with snow, giving him the look of a warrior forged in winter. His chest broadened beneath each breath, and his eyes, amber and ancient, locked onto the stranger with a clarity that cut through the storm. Behind him, the rest of the pack spread out, Cora circling behind the van, Milo pressing against the building with hackles raised, Scout and Duke taking positions near the entrance, and Baron lying low against the wall, ready to spring forward at the slightest wrong move. Inside the lobby, Emily and Lily watched from behind a partially drawn curtain. The emergency lights cast soft shadows on Emily's red-fitted dress, now partially hidden beneath a thick winter jacket someone had wrapped around her earlier. Her hair had dried slightly, curling at the ends. She held Lily close, one hand instinctively shielding her daughter's head. Lily's voice trembled. "Mom, if I tap again, will the dogs hear me?" Emily leaned down, brushing snow-damp hair from her daughter's forehead. "Sweetheart, you don't need to tap anymore. Right now, they're already listening." Outside, the stranger finally spoke. His voice was smooth, well-trained, almost polite. Too polite. "I'm looking for the people from that pickup truck," he said. "I'm supposed to pick up family." Rex answered before any human could. His growl thundered across the lot, deep and vibrating, shaking loose snow from the metal awning. The man flinched, instinctively stepping back. Two other dogs moved into position, blocking his retreat, forcing him to remain exposed beneath the harsh beam of his own headlights. Inside the radio room, the signal finally crackled alive. Daniel Ruiz and the pursuit team had regained radio contact, and they were already speeding back toward the rest stop, sirens piercing the blizzard. Snow blasted against their windshields as they pushed the vehicles to their limit. Daniel gripped the wheel tightly, his jaw set. If the van had turned back, then Emily and Lily were in imminent danger. The moment their convoy slid into the parking lot, they froze, not out of fear, but out of awe. 19 German shepherds had completely surrounded the white van, bodies pressing into the snow like a living barricade. Rex stood squarely at the driver's door, lips curled, canine teeth catching the emergency lights with a terrifying gleam. The stranger inside had been forced to kneel, hands raised above his head, his face drained of confidence. He was breathing hard now. Sweat, despite the freezing air, glittered on his temple. No one had touched him. The pack had done all the work. With the tension hanging like a blade, Daniel and Officer Denise Carter moved in, weapons drawn. Cora growled one last warning, and only then did the officers step between dogs and suspect. They pulled the man to his feet, cuffed him, and escorted him to a patrol vehicle. A quick search of the van revealed restraints, blankets, candy wrappers, and a map with several rest stops circled in red. It wasn't just a van. It was part of a network, a chilling piece of a larger operation. Later at the station, warmth and light finally replaced fear. The floor was wet with melted snow as officers walked back and forth, processing evidence and making urgent calls. The 19 German shepherds lay scattered around the lobby, towels draped over their backs as they rested. Some slept. Some merely dozed. But every few seconds, one of them lifted their head to glance toward Emily and Lily, as though reassuring themselves the two were still safe. Lily, clutching a warm cup of cocoa, approached Rex. His head rested on his paws, but his ears-tonks flicked up when she drew near. Her small fingers slipped into his fur, and she hugged him gently. "I didn't know how to scream," she whispered. "But you still heard me. You saved us." Rex closed his eyes, leaning his head into her shoulder, accepting the gratitude as only a loyal guardian could. Emily watched them with a slow, soft smile, the smile of someone who had walked through terror and stepped out holding the most precious thing in her world. Before leaving, Lily handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. He opened it carefully. Inside, written in shaky, childlike handwriting, were the words, "Tell the dogs, they saved us." And in that moment, every adult in the room went silent, swallowing the tightness in their throats. Because they all knew it was true. Sometimes, the smallest call for help belongs to the bravest hearts who know how to hear it. In the quiet after the storm, when the snow finally settled and the roads grew still, many of the officers would later say the same thing, that what happened that night felt like more than instinct, more than training. It felt like a whisper of protection placed in the world long before any of them arrived. Some called it luck, some called it instinct, but others saw the shape of a miracle. Because sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them with fur, 4 paws, and hearts brave enough to follow the faintest cry for help. Sometimes his protection comes in the form of a mother who refuses to give up, a child who dares to hope, and 19 loyal shepherds who rise through the snow like guardians carved from light. And maybe that's the truth hidden in nights like these, that even in our darkest moments, even when our voices tremble or fail, we are never completely alone. There is always someone listening, and always someone being guided to hear us. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen in the middle of ordinary days. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so these stories can continue reaching those who need them most. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps, just as he guided those brave dogs on that frozen night.